My goal in this video is to display a list of comics, maybe 10 comics at most, for the currently selected character that we was able to achieve in the previous video. And the good news is that we've already got a template for how it should work. We're just going to need to call a different API. We'll get to that in just a moment. Before we do that, while I'm here in the developer portal, we were talking about attribution previously on this page, but there's also something we need to consider with regard to rate limits. Notice here that it says most services default to 1,000 calls per day, but some services may have different rate limits. So if this application becomes popular, that means at most it can only be launched 1,000 times by all customers combined. And that's the best case scenario where every request comes through successfully, and it doesn't take 3 or 4 requests to get all the data that we need. So if this were a real application that I plan on distributing to the world at large, I would reconsider the way that I go about this. One of two things. I would either require end users to get their own key, which is kind of that's a lot of friction in the process, or I might actually create a web service similar to what we did in the UWP weather app. I would make a call from my local app to the web service sitting in Azure or wherever, and it would then go out to the Marvel API, make the necessary call, grab the data, and then cache it locally. Now, you can see that you can, in fact, cache results, save them off locally for a period of time, at most 24 hours. But as they say, the data does change on a regular basis, so you can't just put it in a database and store it to the end of time. If you do, you're breaking the agreement that you have with Marvel and their usage of their API. And also, we can't just go off and grab the entire database in one shot. It says only make the calls that you need. So what I would understand that to be is I can make a call for one client and then cache off the data that I get from him and hold on to it for no more than 24 hours. A second client makes a connection and it requests data, and I can grab data for him and cache him as well. And then a third client requests data, and I can get data for her. And so now I have data from 3 clients, and I'm making these calls. At some point, I'm going to get an error. Where does that specify there? Yeah, you're going to get a return code of 429, which means you've made too many calls. At that point, I can start serving up from my local cache. Does that make sense? That's not what we're going to do in this application, but if I really wanted to use this going forward, that's how I would go about it at a high level. Okay, let's now navigate to our interactive documentation, because what I need to do is find a list of comics for a given character. And so I spent some time and I went through all of the different APIs I could call and how I could call them, and I settled on the /public/comics API. And if you take a look, you can give an optional range of characters. So return only comics which feature the specified characters. It accepts a comma-separated list of IDs. Good enough. So for demonstration purposes, I'm going to grab the real Spider-Man. The ID for Spider-Man is 1009610, and I'm going to limit the number of comics returned to 10. And so let's try that out. Alright, it looks like I have all of the data that I need there. Let me see if I can just grab. Now I need to grab that out. Let's go all the way here to the bottom. I probably should restrict this actually. Let me make the call again, but I'm just going to limit it to two comics. Why 2? Because I don't want just one. I want it to show a collection. And I don't want 10 because it's just too much to give to JSON to C#. So let's scroll up and grab all this stuff. We've done this before, right? We're just doing it now for comics instead of characters. Great. Okay. Go ahead and copy all that. We'll go to JSON to C#, and I'm going to paste all that in. I'll click Generate. And then I am going to scroll to the bottom and copy it all. Control C to copy to my clipboard. And then what I want to do is come over here to my Models folder in my Solution Explorer, and I'm going to go to the Project menu and select Add Class. And I'm going to call this class Comic Data Wrapper because that is what they call it on their side, and I want to use the same term. Then I'm going to highlight the Comic Data Wrapper class stub that they give us and just Control V and paste in all of our data. And I'm going to rename this to Comic Data Wrapper, like so. Now, you'll notice as we go up here, you'll see some red squiggly lines under a few of the items. And the reason for this is that we already have a class named Events in the same namespace. Now, I could either put this in a different namespace, and it wouldn't be in HeroExplorer.models. It would be hero.explorer.models. I don't know, comic. Or I could just simply remove these and rely on the other definition to work in that case. And that's what I'm going to choose to do. I'm going to also remove this item 3 because you'll notice that stories contains a list of items, and those items would be individual story items. So I'm just going to delete that. We're already counted for that. I'm going to get rid of events. And in this case, the Comic Data Wrapper will have a reference to data, which would be a comic data container, which has a list of results, and those result objects are comics. Okay. So actually, let me go ahead and change that. Let me change this. And let me change this to comic data container. And we'll change that as well. All right, so that's how our class structure should look now. And then what I'll need to do is go into our facade, and I'm going to create something almost identical to this. Get character data wrapper async. I'm going to do the same thing for comic. So in fact, I'm just going to copy all of this, the entire method, copy it, and then paste it. Now, a lot of this will be repeatable, so I'm going to pare these down, take out the common code that I need, and then put that in a helper method. So I have to figure out what it is I need first. Let's go back to our call here, and this is the request URL. So I'm going to grab all of this here. And I'm going to use that as the URI here, replacing pretty much everything that I don't need to API key. All right. All right. And so let's trim off the API key here. And I don't know which, we'll come back with the numbers. I'm going to limit this to 10. Let's hard code 10 in here for now. And the character, we'll have to pass that in as well. So I think that's it. So I'm going to pass in the character. That'll be the first thing we replace. The API key will be the second thing we replace. The timestamp will be the third thing we replace, and the hash will be the fourth thing we replace. So the only thing we're really replacing here is the characters. So this would be a character ID that gets passed in. So we're going to call this get comic data wrapper async, and we're going to pass in an int character ID. And I see they're pretty much identical up to the point when we deserialize that JSON message. So what I could probably wind up doing here is taking all of this code here and putting it into a helper method. So private static string, it'll return the JSON message, and this will just be call Marvel. And I'll paste all that in. Now what we'll need to send out, let's see, is pretty much everything up until that API key. So if we were to pass all of this in, we'll call this the URL, then I can make a call to call Marvel. Let's put it like that, and we could do that for now. We'll come back and replace that in a minute. And let's see what the problem is. Oh, we got to return something here. Yeah, we'll return that JSON message. So we'll just we'll return this. And we'll need to make this async. And which means I'm going to name this async. Now it looks like I have some discrepancy here with the URL. Let's call this the complete URL, and we'll pass that in here, like so. Obviously, we're not going to be passing in character ID. What we'll do instead is pass in the URL. Okay. Okay. Now what? Right. This needs to return a task of string. Perfect. And that should work. So this is going to be called call Marvel async, and what we'll get back is the JSON message. So var JSON message equals await, and then we're going to want to compose that URL. So let's go. And we'll come back to that in just a moment too. All right, so that means I can get rid of this, and I can get rid of this character ID, and then get rid of all that. Okay, now we need to make this, I'm going to pass in the URL like that, and that should work. So I'm going to do the same thing up here. We'll keep that URL, but we can rip all of that out and all of this out. We're gonna go here, get rid of everything here except the offset. And I think I may have accidentally deleted the offset. So let me put that back in actually right there. In max characters, yeah, that's a const. And we're going to get back when we make the call. Okay. So I realize there's a lot of refactoring there, but this is good because now all the code that deals with calling marble is in just one method. But I can get rid of this because that's only applicable to one case. Great. Okay, that should work. All right, so the next thing we need to do though is, because we copied and pasted a lot of the code from here, let's make this comic data wrapper, not character data wrapper, right? Okay. And we're going to need to do that here as well. Comic data wrapper. All right, I think we got it. Now what we want to do it's pretty much like what we did here, where we have another method, and we won't need to do quite as much effort. We will need to do that whole thing with the thumbnail images, right? Because some of the images could come back like that. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to recreate it for comics. Populate Marvel comics async, and what we want is an observable collection of comic to be passed in. So instead of Marvel characters, it'll be Marvel comics, like so. And this will be a comic data wrapper. So get characters will be get comic. And it may not have been worth it to copy and paste and change all these references, but it'll at least we'll get some consistency out of this. Comic data wrapper async. Did I not call it that? Get comic data wrapper async. Okay, I did. All right, and I got to give it the ID that I want. All right, so we're going to also pass in the ID. So int character ID. So we'll give it the character ID. Like that. All right, so comic data wrapper dot data dot results equals comics. Here we're going to go for each comic in comics. And then comic dot thumbnail, comic character, comic thumbnail dot path. I'm gonna have to make sure that some of these things are correct. I'll take a few minutes and look through this as well. But I'm pretty sure the same thing applies to comics that apply to characters. Okay, nice. All right, so now we're going to call populate marble comics async when a given item is selected. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is actually create a new property. So prop tab observable collection of comic called Marvel Comics. Awesome. Then I'm going to want to initialize it, right? Marvel Comics equals new observable collection of comic. And then what I'm going to do is Marvel Comics dot clear, because I want to get rid of any previous items in it before I make the next call. And then I'll call it. And I'm going to pass in. So I'm going to pass in the character ID. So let's select character dot ID, and then I'm going to pass in Marvel Comics, like so. Let's see what the problem is. All right, we need to add async here. What is the problem? I'm kind of a knucklehead there. Marble facade dot. There we go. Now we're cooking. Okay. Now, since we're making a call out to the API, what I might want to do is go ahead and reenact the progress ring here. So we'll go ahead and start it here and then end it down here. All right, let's see how this works. Oh, I'm a knucklehead. I forgot the most important part of all. All right, and I see an issue here that we already have a definition for comic, and it's dramatically different. So I'm going to actually name this comic book, and the only place I'll need to rename it is here, I think. Well, I guess I'll need to rename it in a lot of places. Wherever I was depending on it. And fortunately, it's not that many places. I will want to reconsider its use here. Instead of comic, we want comic book. And I'll need that here as well. And then when we pass in the observable collection, it'll be a comic book instead of comic. All right, let's see if that works or if we have other issues. Okay, build. All right, so now on the main page.xaml, I need to bind to that new Marvel Comics collection. All right, so let's work inside of here. So I'm going to call this list of comics, and I'm going to put another grid, and this is going to be the actually it's going to be a grid view, and I'm going to put that in grid row 1, and let's go ahead and set the item source equal to X bind Marvel comic books, and then set the is item click enabled equal to true. We'll come back to that later. And then the is item item clicked equals new event handler. Again, we'll come back to that later. All right, and here what we're going to do, grid view dot item template, and then data template, and then I'm going to put the image of the comic book there. So the image, let's go ahead and set the X data type equal data dot comic book. And so the source is going to be that large. So X bind thumbnail dot large, I think. And we'll make the actually it's small. We want the small one. But that does make me think that maybe I need a different size. Okay, we'll come back to that thought in a second here. We'll make the width equal to 100 and the height equal to 150. And that should pretty much wrap that up. Bound there, that looks good. Here in the facade, when we're populating the comics, I think I want to use a different set of sizes here for these. So I want to use portrait in both cases, because comic books are arrayed in a portrait, not in a standard. So we'll go medium, portrait, medium, and then portrait extra large. Okay, that should work. All right, let's build it and see if it works. Failed. I think maybe it's just a naming issue. Let's see. Here, what I'm going to do. Yeah. This just should be Marvel Comics, not comic books. All right. All right, very good. And let's go. There we go. Look at that, how beautiful that is. It looks like it's having a hard time sometimes with the comics for the same reason. So we'll come back and fix that on the next video, because this one's running a little bit long. But very cool. Okay, we'll continue on in the next video, and you click on one of these and we'll show the information about a given item, a given comic below it. So we'll do that in the next lesson. We'll see you there. Thanks.